So within the concept of content creation, anything that you create as a teacher is monetizable. Your lesson plans, you can monetize those. Don't erase them. Archive them. Keep them in your Dropbox. Keep them in a Google Drive. You can repurpose it so many different ways.
Welcome to another episode of Innovation Insights, where we dive deep into the minds shaping the future of industries through innovation, creativity, and groundbreaking research. We believe that innovation happens in all aspects of life. I am your host, Dr. Eulanda Sanders. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies the spirit of innovation through adaptability, global perspective, and purpose-driven impact. Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. Kwame is the founder of Identity Talk Consulting, a two-time author, longtime educator, global consultant, and host of the Identity Talk for Educators live podcast. With nearly 2 decades of experience in education and 6 years of living and working across Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, and Zambia, Kwame brings a powerful voice to what it means to pivot with intention and repurpose experience into opportunity. His innovation journey began during paternity leave when he wrote his first book, Shaping the Teacher Identity: 8 Lessons That Will Help Define the Teacher in You. That book sparked workshops, a consulting business, and ultimately a platform that now empowers educators around the world to turn their stories and classroom lessons into legacy-building ventures. In this episode, Kwame shares how being a shapeshifter across continents has sharpened his ability to stay connected to education, build new skills, and leverage his digital footprint to create lasting impact. He speaks about the value of repurposing content, the importance of social capital, and why educators must begin archiving their intellectual property now. Tune in, take notes, and get ready to reshape how you think about teaching, leading, and storytelling in today's evolving world. Kwame, welcome to the Innovation Insights podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
I appreciate to be here, Eulanda. Thank you so much.
Tell me a little bit about, we were trying to figure out how we connected, and we think it was through probably LinkedIn networking and having common people.
I will say that's right. No, you're absolutely right. We did connect through LinkedIn. Actually, I found you on LinkedIn, and what caught my eye was the name of the podcast, Innovation Insights. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I think I'm innovative. I've done a lot of innovative things. This very much aligns with who I am. And then also, you had my good friend, Dr. Asia Lyons, on recently. And I said, well, if Dr. Lyons is on this show, then there must be something good about it. So I reached out to you and we clicked, and here we are today having a conversation.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's always so good for people to see how connections are made, and also how easy it is to reach out to someone that you don't know sometimes, and that's on the internet, and then make a connection, and then, yeah, be on a podcast with them. Oh, well, you're a teacher, you're an educator. Could you tell us a little bit about what drew you into education?
I think the first thought that comes to my mind is the fact that I come from a family where education was of a high priority. Both of my parents were born and raised in Ghana, in West Africa, graduated from high school, and decided to come to the United States to start a new life as immigrants. And from that point on, they went on to have 3 children, and I grew up as a middle child. And throughout my life, education has always been something that has been important, not only to myself, but to my family. And I generally loved going to school. I loved getting good grades. I loved being able to get my homework done so I could get to my Nintendo and Super Nintendo and all the other systems I had back then on my brother. And I was fortunate to have really good teachers throughout my K-12, especially my first one, Miss Martin, who I actually had during my first 4 to 5 years in elementary school. So I talk about this in my book, If You Teach Identity, where I actually had her those first few years. And I was a special education student. So I was in a self-contained classroom where there are students with other disabilities there. So you can name it: autism, ADHD, Asperger's, and other intellectual disabilities. So that was the type of setting I was in. And that led to a lot of ridicule, led to teasing, led to a lot of jokes and name calling. And then being that I was a first generation immigrant and I was darker than pretty much everybody in the school, then there were some colorism jokes about my skin and everything. So there was a lot to have to navigate being a student in special education classroom, not being able to ride the same traditional yellow school bus as everybody else, riding a smaller van that clearly others you and let folks in your neighborhood know, oh, you're in that kind of classroom. So that was a lot to deal with. But when I think back to what drew me to education, I think it's that, but also the fact that when I started college at Temple University, well over 20 years ago, I had no idea what I was going to do. I started off as an actuarial science major because my dad was an actuary for many years, worked at Aetna for a lot of years. That was a lot of money. So I thought maybe that's something I want to do, follow his footsteps. And then right before I started my freshman year, I switched my major from actuarial science to mathematics, which is what I ended up doing for my 5 years of undergrad. And that was only because I was a math student all throughout my K to 12. Math was my favorite subject. It was my best subject. It was a subject that came the easiest. So I figured let's continue it in college. No other reason than that. So freshman year, I end up in a volunteer mentoring program where I was assigned a mentee who was a middle school student. I think he was probably eighth grade. I did that for a couple of months and I enjoyed it. That's when I got my first taste of working with kids. So when I came back my sophomore year, I decided to get a work study job with our local YMCA, which was 5 minute walk from Temple's campus. And I ended up working at that school program 2 to 3 times a week. Did that for a couple hours each day. And it was just simply working with kids, tutoring them in different subjects, providing mentorship, helping out with their homework and doing other extracurricular activities. And that allowed me to really get a sense of what it was like to work with students, particularly those who are of different socioeconomic backgrounds. So growing up, I have both parents in my life. Had It was a middle class neighborhood where there was a good amount of black people, but still, yeah, pretty diverse. So we never were in a situation where we struggled to have food. We lived in a house for many years, had our own yard, had friends in the neighborhood. So it was a very normal childhood for the most part. So to fast forward to now being in this space where I'm working with students who have to grow up really fast, students who have to become adults at a very young age because their mother's not around, their father's not around, whether they're deceased or incarcerated, what have you. They have to step up and take care of their siblings. There were some that at some point had to drop out of school so they can work full time in order to take care of the family financially because there was no other adults that could do that. And then, of course, there are other social vices as well. So, of course, you hear about drugs, you hear about teenage pregnancy, other influences that you hear about when you have students who are clear from the hood, living in an urban setting. I was exposed to that, and it made me realize that even though we're all black, We all have very different experiences. And I saw that I was very privileged to have what I had, right? To have two active parents, to have siblings, to be able to go to college and graduate, and to be able to afford it, even though we hadn't staked out student aid or financial aid like everybody else, we still had the opportunity to go to college and get an education that allowed us to travel down other professional pathways. Some students aren't able to do that because the family income isn't where it needs to be. So to be able to learn these stories and to have these relationships with students coming from those circumstances, it really opened my eyes to the inequities of our school system in the United States. When you look at suburban school districts versus urban school districts, you recognize how different they are, and you start to understand what privileges each student have in each of those settings. So this is all things I'm learning as an undergrad. Now I graduate from Temple, got my degree, and now I have to make a decision. Do I want to, what am I going to do with this math degree? I got this math degree now, but I have this love for kids. And at this point, I've worked with kids for the past 5 years. So how do I marry these two together? And that's what led me to want to do education and become a teacher. So as I was doing this AmeriCorps program called Education Works, that's when I got my first taste of actually working in a school setting, in a classroom with students, and seeing the day-to-day operations of how things work and how certain situations come up over the course of a school year. And what was interesting to me was the fact that in this school where 9% of the students are Black and Latinx, the converse is the teacher staff was 9% Caucasian or white. And while there were some pretty good teachers in that setting, there were some who I saw and I kept thinking to myself, man, if it was me in that situation, I could do a better job of me connecting with the students because I knew where they came from. I knew how to get down to their level and have some authentic, enduring relationships. Now, I'm not going to say that from a pedagogical standpoint, I'd be able to teach better than them because I wasn't at that stage yet. But in terms of building rapport and having those social connections with students, I knew that I was at a pretty good place. And I also said, so often with young Black people, they see us primarily as athletes or as entertainers. And I said, would it be cool for myself to stand in front of a group of Black students and show them that, hey, you could be cool, you could be smart, and you could become a teacher, and this could be a viable professional pathway you can take. So these are just some of the things that were coming to mind for me as I'm making these connections. So of course, I finished that program. I go back to school to get my master's degree and my initial teacher's cert. And I started teaching in Philadelphia in 2010 and did that for 5 years as a middle school math teacher. Eventually, I moved to Boston with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and taught there for another 4 years in that same capacity. And then 2019, my wife got a great opportunity to work with the Peace Corps, which meant we would have to go abroad and live there while she did that job. And we've been doing that since 2019. And I've been able to grow even more ever since then. And I know we'll get into that part of the journey down the road.
That's such an amazing journey, and thank you for taking us on that from your family and childhood up to where you are now. Part of that journey also included writing the book, which you mentioned, Shaping the Teacher Identity. Tell us what inspired you to write that book, and you wrote it while you were on paternity leave.
Yes, so this is the book right here. And this is the book that started everything. All the things that you probably seen on LinkedIn, the podcast, everything started with this book. So going back to 2017, December 2017, my wife had just given birth to our first son, and I was at home on paternity leave, and I didn't have much to do other than change diapers and learn how to be a first-time father. So in between waking up in the middle of the night, changing diapers and taking sporadic naps with my wife, I decided that I wanted to do a book because I had friends who had already engaged in that. And they were telling me how cool it was. I was able to go to their book launch and everything else and see how everything came together. That's something that I definitely want to do. So I actually went ahead and started writing. I didn't even know what a manuscript was, believe it or not. I'm just writing or typing on my computer, put all my thoughts in the Google Drive, and day by day, I would just type a little bit at a time, a little bit here, a little bit there, interviewed a few educators along the way, watched some YouTube to learn the process of writing a book because I was self-publishing. I wasn't signed to any publisher or anything like that. I'm learning on the go as I'm writing this book. And after 3 months of writing, I was pretty much done. And this is right before I was getting ready to report back to my school to start working again. So I spent the rest of that school year fine tuning the manuscript, editing, making tweaks, and then finally I was able to release that December 2018. And when I released it, I thought, okay, I wrote the book, I'm done. Cause you have to remember, I was a math kid. I liked reading, I liked writing, but it was something that I had to work on. It didn't come in easy. So the thought of me writing a full length book was never something that was part of the plan. It just happened by accident, but I did it. And then I had a friend of mine tell me, listen, Kwame, you can really do more with this book. You have some good content in here. You could go out here and take parts of the book, do workshops with other organizations and schools. You could repurpose it in other ways. And then she said this one thing. Once you write a book, you now become an authority figure in your field. You're now going to be viewed as an expert. So you now have to continue to build on that content and share it and make it accessible to the different people within your audience that you're targeting. So that's how I started doing workshops, pro bono workshops at neighboring school districts in the greater Boston area. Even took a few days off of my full-time job still as a teacher in order to do that, which I wasn't supposed to do, but listen, it was an opportunity I couldn't refuse. So I did that, and this would go on for about 4 or 5 months. So I was going to different schools, I was doing presentations, workshops. I even spoke at a few universities to some pre-service teachers. And as I was getting deeper and deeper into this work, I kept on getting questions like, how much do you charge for your workshops? And that kind of shocked me because I didn't go to school for business, nor was I going into it with the mindset of, hey, I'm trying to get thousands of dollars out of this. I just simply did it because I love it, right? I love education, I love teaching, and I love teaching people. But when that started to happen, I recognized that I can make this monetizable. So I need to make this an LLC. So May 2019, That's how Identity Talk Consultant was born. And I was able to build it from there. Still talking to different schools. And right when I was gaining momentum, I told you my wife got her job with Peace Corps. So 2 months after set up the MLC, we are on a plane headed to Ethiopia, where we would start living. So that's how the international part of my journey started.
Man. Yeah. Oh, that is fabulous. That is fabulous. Okay, we'll come back to the entrepreneur part because you've really set that up nicely, how that has evolved. But you touched on the international part. So Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, Zambia. That's where you are now, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. So how has living and working internationally impacted you as a professional, an innovator, an educator?
It's been an emotional roller coaster because in this situation, I'm coming as a training spouse, right? So I'm literally abroad with my family because of my wife's job, which I fully support 100%, even to this day. But I guess I didn't anticipate how difficult it was going to be to make that transition professionally. Initially, I was thinking that I could just apply to an international school and continue my teaching career. That was the plan. And Identity Talk was going to be a side hustle that I would dibble and dabble into until I could get myself settled abroad. But then once I saw how difficult it was to get into the international school scene, that's when I finally just pivoted and focused more on Identity Talk and building that up. So I applied for a few jobs there, wasn't able to gain any ground with that. So then so I'm at home thinking, man, what can I do? Like I'm bored out of my mind. This is the first time in 13 years that I'm not reporting to a school to teach a classroom of students or to work there or to deal with parents or lesson plans and staff meetings. I have all this out of turn, which was weird. And it, quite frankly, made me uncomfortable because I'm so used to being busy, 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 busy. So to not have any busyness going on, you're like, oh, wow, what am I doing? The world is going on without me. Yeah. So I had this interesting idea of starting a podcast. And it actually came to be because I was starting to dabble in social media. So I was more active with my Instagram account, my Facebook account, and I was seeing all these teachers or influencers showing videos of themselves teaching in the classroom, doing all these cool tips and making all this cool. And I'm like, this is awesome. I want to do something like this. If I can't get myself into a classroom physically and continue teaching, then I have an opportunity to create my own classroom. And that's really how Identity Talk for Educators Live was born. So it started off with me getting on Zoom and sending cold emails to random educators who I liked on social media and asked them, hey, do you want to spend a whole hour to talk about yourself? Yeah, why not? It's free. You don't have to pay any money. You're just talking about yourself. So I started off doing that. Literally just hit record, let me talk for an hour, hit record again, download that MP4, upload it into YouTube. No editing, nothing, just raw recording. And I did that for about 20 episodes. And then I discovered some tools that I could use to really formalize the podcast. So I came across StreamYard, which I still use to this day. I came across Audacity, which is what I use to edit audio and other parts of the podcast. And then I also came across freelancer websites such as Upwork, where I could send over recordings to somebody and they can edit it for me so I can use that time to still build up the business. So these were things that I was discovering along the way. And over the course of 200 plus recordings, I've been able to build some of the most amazing relationships with some of my guests. Well, many of them. Some of them have become frequent collaborators on different projects. Others were actually contributors to my latest book, Learn to Relearn, which we'll talk about. A good number of them were. And then through podcasting, I was able to network because here's the thing, and you've probably experienced this too with this podcast. You spend an hour letting somebody talk about how great they are at what they do, share their story. You go through that process. Now it's, hey, let me tell you about myself. You've already got the rapport. Y'all too. So now it's, hey, outside of podcasting, here's what I do. XYZ. Can you recommend some other people to come on the podcast? Can you recommend some schools that would be interested in having me come on to their campus to either keynote or lead a workshop? So now you have to do your elevator pitch and let them know, hey, this is what I offer outside of podcasting, because you don't want to be typecast as just a podcaster that just talks about it. You want to let them know that, hey, I do this and I've been doing this many years, well before the podcasting thing. So it's been great to be able to do that and also to build a digital footprint, which is something that I would understand later on. Like, whenever you put out content like this out to the abyss, it really doesn't matter how many views or likes you end up getting. It's in the atmosphere for someone to consume. And the more you attach your name to the content, the more it's going to come up in people's news feeds when they type your name. And that's something that I realized, because as I'm doing my podcast, I'm getting on other people's podcasts. I'm getting on other people's Instagram lives. I'm getting on other people's conference platforms to share more about who I am while I'm sharing my own content, which is then causing a cumulative effect and leading to where I am now. So, yeah, podcasting has been awesome and has led to so many different opportunities for collaboration, opportunities to build even fresher content, and to figure out different ways to really reframe what professional learning can look like for K to 12 educators in this space.
Why do you feel that many educators do not think about their social presence, doing a podcast, using social media, creating content in this way?
So I'll share my perspective on that. Just stemming off of my own story. I believe the reason why we don't have more educators going down this path of content creation, I think it's because when we first get into our respective school districts, we still view ourselves as employees and not commodities. That's the framing that we come in with, right? Because we saw, in my case, when I first came in and became a full-time teacher, my colleagues who were veterans had been doing it for 15, 20, 25 years. They were grinders. They were working 50 hours a week. They were getting into school at 6:30 in the morning and leaving the school 5 o'clock in the evening. And I thought that was the norm. I thought that was the life and how it's supposed to be. And then as I got older, I wised up and I realized This is not sustainable for living purposes. And this is a very imbalanced way to live life. So I needed to make some changes to that. And I think with teachers, they don't view themselves as experts. They don't see the possibilities of what can be if they put themselves out there in a different way. I mean, just think about how we network today, 2025 versus, let's say, 1995, right? It is a very different world. Back in 1995, you had to have a resume or a CV. You had to have a cover letter, physical cover letter that you either typed or you wrote down by hand. You had to have the resume typed up and you would submit it, and you would actually physically go into these corporations and organizations to have a face-to-face conversation with the supervisor or an HR person or manager. That was the way to get into these spaces. Now, in 2025, you still have to do those things, but they're becoming more and more obsolete because of the emergence of social media, because of the emergence of just the internet and digital networking. Like LinkedIn, for example. I'm on LinkedIn every day. And the reason why is because LinkedIn is where all the corporations are. LinkedIn is where all the professionals are. And even if you don't have a social media account, as a professional, and you hate social media, the one account you're going to have is a LinkedIn account. And it's for the very reason that I just mentioned. Because you can network. You can learn more about these different companies. You can build your capacity with courses, free courses, in order to build your professional profile. You can put your resume on your LinkedIn page so everybody knows your business. You can get recommendations from people who have worked with you who are also on LinkedIn and have it right on that same page. It's it's like a one-stop shop. Everything is there for you. So I think we look at content creation and also the fact that in certain states, and this is something that I learned as I was writing my book and writing different publications. When you do that, and it's for the very area that you specialize in or the subject that you teach, you can get professional learning credits that you need to accumulate in order to advance to the next level of your certification, depending on what state you're in. And as you write a book, that carries even more credits. Because that's like the equivalent of, I don't know, 50 blogs, right? Because books are pretty sizable. So I start to see how beneficial it is. And then also, when you write a book, it doesn't have to be a New York Times bestseller. It doesn't have to be an award-winning book. When you write a book in general, people look at you differently. People really look at you differently. I kid you not. I was in Boston Public Schools for 5 years. And through different functions, I got to know a lot of people because Boston is pretty small, right? As soon as my book came out, some of the people who I had met over the years who didn't really pay me any mind, now all of a sudden, oh, okay, let's talk. All because I wrote a book. People are fascinated with books because the perception that when you write a book, goes back to what my friend said, you're an expert. You know a thing or two about something that may be a pain point for my school or my organization. Let me learn more about you. So I was able to really start to build relationships and get my foot in the door because of the fact that I was an author, because of the fact that I was a podcaster and interviewed some of the most brilliant educator minds in the space. These were things that gave me clout and also opened up the door to other opportunities. It opened up the door for other connections, right? I mean, I've been able to write for some of the education media spaces that's Edutopia, Education Week, which is a big one. Everybody reads Education Week, Teaching Channel, many others. Even was able to be interviewed by Tavis Smiley himself. When you think about Black media, yes, Roland Martin, but Tavis Smiley is right up there. You get an interview with Tavis Martin, someone who I grew up watching on PBS, late night show. And then fast forward over 20 years later, his production team is calling me because they're interested in me being on the show to talk about an article I wrote about why Black boys don't shoot up schools. This is all from a blog that I wrote back in 2022 when there were a line of school shootings happening in different parts of the states, right? So all from content. People see the content. Content has reach to different countries, different places that you would never imagine. So I know I went around the world with it, but that's what it did for me.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. What advice would you give a young educator starting their career and thinking, maybe I want to also have an entrepreneurial part of my career? I'm a teacher, but I want to do that and explore content creation. What advice would you give to a young educator?
I would say number one, have a plan. So from the minute if you are an in-service teacher who's doing their practicum or student teaching, and you're about to enter your school district, before you even do that, have a plan for number one, what's your end goal? What do you ultimately want to do? Do you want to become a principal? Do you want to become a superintendent? Do you want to work in policy? What area are you particularly interested in? What's your end game? Right? And also, how many years do you want to be in the classroom? How many years do you want to be working in a school district? You have to be very clear about how long you want to do it because then you can start the process of building your next professional life as you're living this current professional life, right? So within the concept of content creation, anything that you create as a teacher is monetizable. Your lesson plans, you can monetize those. Don't erase them. Archive them. Keep them in your Dropbox. Keep them in a Google Drive. You can repurpose it so many different ways, right? Anytime you voluntarily lead a professional development workshop with your colleagues in your school, get recommendations. Doesn't matter if they paid you or not. Those are testimonials and recommendations that you can put in the future on your website for your business, right? So you have to understand that when you first get started, and this is going back to the digital footprint conversation, you have to build your profile because nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows who you are. So you have to build credibility through your content, through your testimonials, through other sources so people know who you are so that they can then feel confident enough to hire you to do work in their school. So those are some of the lessons that I would share with young teachers who are thinking about going down this route. Also, too, blog is a big thing. Blogging. Maybe you don't want to write a book. You can put down your own opinions about what's happening in education. You could write an article about a cool teach strategy that you did with your students. You can do that in 400 words, 500 words, and get that published. And with some of those companies, they will pay you for the blog that you publish. They will pay you. I was getting paid for 3 years writing editorial pieces for Ed Post. And that's turned out to be really good supplemental income. Edutopia pays people for every piece they publish on their website. If you want to do something more independent, you can even do your own blog series on your website or get a Medium account. And with Medium, your own series, independent of any company, and get paid in the process through affiliates. So there are ways to get yourself out there. Writing is one of the best ways to demonstrate your expertise. And the more you write, the more people see what it is. Even if you don't get paid for it, you can build up a pretty big library of content for people to access.
Absolutely. Such great advice. Such great advice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to talk about your second book that you held up there.
Well,
Tell us about that book.
so with Learn to Relearn, in many ways, this is a book that is a mantra for my own life. I feel like there have been so many times throughout my life that I've had to learn to relearn who I was, right? Um, Going back to my K to 12, when I started as a student in a special education classroom, through that socialization, my initial perception of myself was I might not be that smart because people around me are saying I'm not that smart because I'm in this setting. But I had to relearn that I am smart. I am just as smart as everybody else. I just had to learn certain things in a different way in order to be at the same level equitably as others. Relearn it. Even going back to being a first generation Ghanaian American, right? There's so many struggles that one will have with that identity, being a first generation immigrant, not growing up in your parents' birth country, not being able to speak your parents' mother tongue or home language. Go into that country and people are telling you that you're not enough. In my case, you're not Ghanaian enough. You're being shamed because you can't speak your language, because you didn't grow up in the same ancestral area that your parents grew up. So you start to internalize those negative messages. So the relearning for me was, okay, even though I grew up in the States, that doesn't mean that I'm not Ghanaian. I'm Ghanaian in my blood. I'm Ghanaian in spirit. I may not have the accent that your traditional Ghanaian would have, but I'm still Ghanaian. And so therefore, I'm gonna lift my head up in pride and walk in the universe with that. How to relearn that. Took therapy, took counseling to get to that piece. And there's still days where I struggle with that, to be honest. What else? Learn to relearn, just professionally. I thought I was going to be a classroom teacher for 20, 25, 30 years. But then when I discovered the wonderful world of content creation, I realized that I can still be an educator at heart and still have an impact on students through podcasting, through writing, through consulting, through keynote speaking. It's just happened in a different way. than what I was doing the first decade of my professional life. I had to relearn that I'm still very much an educator, even though I am now in a K-12 classroom teaching 180 plus days a year, sorry. I'm still very much an educator, learning to relearn. All right. Um, and then just as a father, right? When you think about gender roles, when you think about patriarchy, thinking about how I grew up with a father who was the breadwinner in our family. I grew up with a mother who did all the domestic responsibility that you would think of as a woman. They had very traditional gender roles. And my dad, he made a lot of mistakes, right? In the marriage that didn't allow for me to see a good example of what that looks like between husband and wife. I didn't get a good example of marriage. I didn't have a blueprint growing up. So that was something I had to learn and relearn over time. So the relearning for me was the redefining of gender roles, being okay with cooking, being okay with, hey, I'm going to change the diaper, being okay with, in my case, I've never been the financial breadwinner in my family. My wife has always made significantly more money than me because teacher, we don't get paid, y'all. So that's never been the situation for me. And I am totally fine with that. I have no shame in saying that I've been the breadwinner in my family, in my marriage. Being a trans spouse while being abroad, being a school parent, going to parent teacher conferences where my wife's not able to go, talking to my son's teachers on a regular basis just to keep everybody abreast of what's going on with them. These are the roles that I've had to inherit in this role as a trans spouse so that my wife can continue to focus on being the best person she can be at her job because she's in a leadership position as a woman. When we think about the dynamics, we think about, in her case, what it means to be a professional mother and still be a present parent for our two sons. In my case, what it looks like to combat those ideas of toxic patriarchy, right? What it means to build emotional intelligence, what it means to confront your childhood trauma in a way that doesn't interfere with your relationship with your sons as well as your wife. I had to go through that. That was a relearning process for me. Being close to my 40s and having to tell my father about the harm he had imposed on me as a child, just to bring closure to that situation. That was something that I had to deal with, right? So when I think about this book again, Learning to Relearn, and what it needs to support identity as an educator, it's all those things. We have students who speak multiple languages. We have students who come from different religious backgrounds. We have students with different ethnicities. We have students who are first, second, third, fourth generation immigrants. Students who have different sexual orientation, different gender identities. All these identity markers impact the way in which they navigate this world that we're in. And also, there's a K-12 school space. So when I thought about my own journey, living abroad, all the different stages of my life, this was a book that spoke to who I've become and who I believe educators can become if they commit themselves to this process of relearning.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for touching on so many important topics and identity being one of them. And I think sometimes we feel that we're born with an identity or we have one that is placed on us and that we can't relearn or make change or evolve or innovate who we are. So thank you for touching on that. As you reflect on the last 6 years and thinking about Identity Talk Consulting, what are you most proud of?
Wow, the big question. And this is probably the first time I've had a chance to answer that question on a podcast. So I thank you for this question. When I think about Day Talk Consulting, I am proud of the fact that I've been able to persist in this mission and rarely stay true to the teacher in me. That's the part that I'm most proud of. I've been able to go from writing a book to growing into a business to then starting a podcast. And then from the podcast, I organized a virtual conference at the height of COVID. And the presenters were past podcast guests. And we're able to bring in 150 educators across the globe for a 4-day experience virtually. I'm proud that I was able to do that at the height of COVID and get some good money out of it. I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to connect with so many educator minds and consultants who are North Stars, who are considered A-level celebrity status in this space. I mean, if you had told me that I'll be able to interview people like Dr. Goldie Muhammad or a Zaretta Hammond or Dr. Eulanda Sanders or a Principal Confele, just to name a few. These are people, if you're in the education space, you definitely know who they are. They are like up here. But to be able to say, you know what? I'm gonna put myself out there and ask them to come on, and they all came, and even one of them was able to write for the book that Eulanda Sanders, shout out to her. How I was able to even get her to write the forward was just from a recording. We had done a podcast recording. It was an interview with her for the podcast. And right after, I told her what my idea was. I was probably 3 or 4 months into the process of writing the book. They even have the title at the time. And she said yes, even though she barely knew who I was. But because I interviewed her best friend, Dr. Goldie Muhammad, that was enough. So going back to networking, how that benefited me in that situation. But I would say with Identity Talk, the fact that it is now a brand that people are getting more and more familiar with, when people see me, they know what this is about. And I've been able to tie the message of staying true to the teacher in you in everything that I do, the way that I align myself with that mission, the way that I'm able to evolve is very much consistent with the message. The fact that I've been able to still believe in this vision of Identity Talk, even during very financially strenuous times. Like when you're a consultant, it's hard. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I've had a lot of dry spells. I've had some dry months. I've had some great moments too in between, but a lot more dry months. But why do I keep on going? Why do I fight against the urge of going back to a 9 to 5 or doing something that I know is not going to give me the joy that I believe I deserve? It's because I believe in the vision and I continue to believe in the vision no matter how much effort and how much investment I'm going to have to continue to put into it. I know this is something that people need, and that's what keeps me going. So I'm proud of that.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, oh, the last question that we ask every guest is how do you define innovation?
Innovation. For me, innovation is the ability to create, redefine, or bring to life a vision, a product, or a mantra that the world has yet to see, right? We are innovating. You're doing something extraordinary. You're doing something that very few or none have even thought of that you know is going to solve a problem in this world. The greatest innovators are always looking for what the issues are that need to be solved. What are the mysteries of the world that we have yet to unsolve, right? And when you're an innovator, you're always thinking of different ways of doing the same thing. You're always tweaking. You're always refining. You're always trying to get the upper hand creatively when it comes to that. So when I think of innovation, I think of just that. So that's my definition.
That's a fabulous definition. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Oh, and I just also wanted to ask you too, just very quickly,
Sure.
what is next for Identity Talk Consulting? What's your next plans?
Right now, still creating some more content to support the latest book, Learn to Relearn. It's been able to garner a lot of great attention. It's already garnered 3 awards: the Epi Gold Medal, a Ford Indies Gold Award, and now an International Impact Book Award. This book, and it's only been out for,
Congratulations.
thank you so much. It's only been out for about 8 or 9 months. So still building more content around that. But also because we're about to start a new school year, we're currently booking for that school year. So if there are any schools that are looking for professional development throughout the year for their staff, if you need someone to come in to do a keynote, somebody to come in to talk to kids for an assembly, or if you have Learn to Relearn and you love what you read and you want to talk to your community about it, I'm even happy to facilitate a book talk, which I've been able to do for different communities over the past few months. Make sure you visit Identity Talk Consulting, and our website is identitytalk4educators.com. And over there, you'll be able to learn more about our services. You'll be able to learn more about the podcast, and you'll be able to find all of my social media platforms there. So it's pretty much a one-stop shop for everything identity talk. So yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And we'll also make sure that everything is put in the show notes too, so that people can easily access them. Kwame, thank you for being here. I really do appreciate your view of your career and not have it be monolithic with just in academic walls, that you have broken through those walls into the rest of the world and using the internet and social media to continue teaching and offering impact and good content. And so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Eulanda, for having me, and thank you for this podcast. This is a podcast that is necessary in the universe. So thank you for having the space to host these important conversations about innovation and creativity.
Thank you. To our audience, thank you for joining us for this conversation with Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, educator, author, consultant, true global innovator. He has been from the classrooms in Boston to international living rooms, and his story reminds us of that adaptability is not just a skill, it's a mindset, and that we can relearn what we've been given or been identified as. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and comment and like on the podcast, and please share the word. This helps us continue to provide these impactful conversations Also, connect with Kwame on LinkedIn and follow him on all of his social media platforms and Innovation Insights too. So, for more resources and upcoming episodes and engaging with us, follow us on social media too and our website, innovationandinsights.com. So, thanks for tuning in. Keep innovating, keep dreaming, and keep making a difference.